Inc. https://w.youtube.com Watch V YR size sin 9Q 1. In a forgotten alley of Detroit's slums, where flickering streetlights cast a feeble glow on peeling walls and jagged cracks spiderwebbed across the pavement, Ethan Carter came into the world. No celebrations marked his arrival. No gifts sparkled in welcome. Only the soft, resolute lullaby of his mother, Clara, her voice weaving a delicate cocoon against the harsh chill of winter nights. That tender melody, laced with unyielding strength, wrapped around the newborn boy, shielding him from the chaos beyond their door. The shouts, the venomous quarrels of his father, a mechanic chained to the bottle. Their home held little: worn-out clothes, chipped bowls, and dreams that felt like stars too distant to touch. Ethan grew up in a stifling apartment, the air heavy with the mingled smells of machine oil and whiskey. His shoes, frayed at the heels, left his toes bruised and blue in the cold. His coat, a cast-off from an older brother who'd long since fled, offered scant protection. Yet, amidst this scarcity, Ethan stood apart from the other children in the neighborhood. In his deep brown eyes flickered a spark, an ember of defiance that refused to be snuffed out. It was the flame of hope, a fierce conviction that this life of want was not his destiny. He rejected the notion that fate had condemned him to dwell forever in the shadows. Each night, as pale moonlight seeped through the cracked window pane, Ethan curled up on his creaking bed, his gaze fixed on the sky. The stars, distant yet radiant, seemed to murmur a promise of something greater. He counted them, each pinprick of light a silent ally, and whispered to himself, "One day, I'll break free. I'll forge a new life." Those words weren't mere wishes. They were a vow, carved deep into his soul. But how could he make it real? That question, sharp and unyielding, pierced his heart nightly. Not just a query, but a gauntlet thrown by fate itself, daring him to rise. Life in the slums was a relentless crucible. For Ethan, days blurred into a cycle of hunger and hardship. Some nights he drifted to sleep with an empty stomach, sipping water to hush the gnawing ache. Some days he dodged his father's drunken fury, when liquor turned the man into a stranger who saw not his son, but a target for rage. Yet, even in the bleakest moments, Ethan guarded the fire within him. He found refuge in the smallest joys: a rare, fleeting smile from his mother, a fairy tale she spun in her weary voice, or a crust of stale bread she'd tucked beneath her pillow for him. These humble fragments, though fleeting, were the beacons that kept his dreaming heart alive. Clara, his mother, with silver threading her dark hair and hands roughened by endless toil, was Ethan's sole anchor. Despite the cruelties of their world, she fought to carve out a home, however cramped and crumbling. Her lullabies were more than melodies to lull him to sleep. They were a testament that love could endure in the darkest places. But Ethan saw the weight she carried. On nights when she sat in silence, her eyes tracing the horizon with unspoken sorrow, he knew she, too, had once held dreams, buried beneath the burdens of life. Witnessing her quiet pain, Ethan's determination deepened. He yearned not only to transform his own fate, but to lift the woman who'd poured her everything into him. The slums of Detroit, with their litter-strewn streets and the wail of sirens cutting through the night, were no nursery for ambition. Hope here often withered before it could bloom. Ethan's neighbors, their faces etched with weariness and their tales heavy with surrender, seemed to have accepted defeat as their inheritance. But Ethan was cut from a different cloth. When someone scoffed, "You'll never amount to anything," he'd press his lips tight, fists curling, and let the fire in his heart blaze hotter. He knew the road ahead would be brutal, that his dream might be a mirage shimmering just out of reach. But he didn't care. As long as a single spark of hope endured, Ethan would fight to his last breath. The question how was a relentless specter, haunting his every step, but it didn't shatter him. Instead, it fueled his resolve, spurring him to seek answers in the chaos. Each night, as he counted the stars, he conjured a vision of a different life. A warm home filled with laughter. A world where his mother no longer wept in the shadows. A future where he could stand tall with pride. That dream, however distant, was the lantern illuminating his path through the slum's darkness. It wasn't just a fantasy. It was a call to action, a challenge he embraced with every fiber of his being. In the heart of that unforgiving world, Ethan Carter, the boy with tattered shoes and a spirit brimming with ambition, began his journey. The slums, with their suffocating grip, tried to bind him, but his heart refused to be caged. He didn't yet know how he'd climb from the depths to the heights, but he knew he would. The fire within him, kindled by those starlit vows, burned with a ferocity that no hardship could extinguish. And so, in the quiet of those desolate nights, Ethan's odyssey took root, a journey no one, not even he, could have foreseen would lead to a legacy of fame, fortune, and unbreakable resolve. At 16, Ethan Carter's life was a relentless grind, a repetitive loop ensnared in the oppressive shadows of Detroit's slums. Each day bled into the next, marked by the same struggle to survive in a world that seemed to have forgotten him. But on one blistering summer afternoon, as the sun scorched the cracked, dusty streets, a sudden spark pierced the monotony. Ethan, as he often did, roamed through piles of garbage, his calloused hands sifting through rusted metal, discarded plastic bottles, and forgotten debris, searching for scraps to trade for a few coins. Those coins weren't just currency. They were his lifeline to tattered textbooks, which to Ethan were more than mere pages. They were gateways to a boundless world where his audacious dream of becoming a millionaire wasn't met with scorn or laughter. Amid the chaotic heaps of roadside trash, something small, nearly hidden beneath a tangle of crumpled papers, caught his eye. It was an old diary, its leather cover battered and frayed, its edges worn as if it had weathered countless storms. Ethan plucked it from the pile, brushing away layers of grime, and a strange, inexplicable thrill pulsed through him. Something deep within whispered that this was no ordinary find. Seeking refuge from the relentless heat, he settled on the curb beneath the sparse shade of a scraggly tree and opened the diary's first page. There, in faded blue ink, were the scrawled words of an unnamed man, a businessman, now departed, who had risen from the depths of nothing to the zenith of success. Each sentence struck Ethan like a thunderbolt, each word dismantling the barriers that had long confined his dreams. The diary was no mere story. It was a treasure, a meticulously drawn roadmap forged in the blood, sweat, and tears of its author. The man wrote of days when hunger gnawed at his bones, of failures that crushed his spirit, and of moments when he clawed his way back from despair. He spoke of seizing fleeting opportunities, of relentless perseverance, of clinging to the belief that no obstacle was insurmountable. Ethan devoured the pages, his heart racing as the words fanned the smoldering embers of hope in his chest. The oppressive heat, the hollow ache of hunger in his stomach, the world around him, all faded as he lost himself in the diary's wisdom. As the sky blazed with a crimson sunset, Ethan pulled a scrap of paper and a dull pencil from his pocket, scribbling furiously. Ideas, lessons, fragments of inspiration that felt as though they'd been written solely for him. Night after night, as the slums sank into a heavy darkness, Ethan sat by the flickering light of a single candle, poring over the diary. Its pages became his sanctuary, a place where he could envision himself as the man within them, standing triumphant atop the world, gazing down with hard-earned pride. The diary was more than a book. It was his mentor, his confidant, his sole beacon in a sea of doubt and derision. It didn't merely impart knowledge, it fortified his conviction that his millionaire dream was no fleeting fantasy, but a destiny he could seize. Ethan began to dream grander, to think beyond the confines of the slums, and for the first time he glimpsed a faint guiding light illuminating the foggy path ahead. But fate, ever capricious, rarely allows hope to linger unchallenged. One fateful night, after a grueling day of scavenging, Ethan returned to the cramped, airless room he called home. The sharp stench of whiskey hit him like a physical blow, signaling trouble. His father, swaying drunkenly, his bloodshot eyes glinting with unfocused rage, filled the space with a menacing presence. Ethan tried to slip past, as he'd learned to do, but his father's gaze snagged on the diary, left carelessly on the rickety table. "What's this?" he bellowed, snatching it up with clumsy, trembling hands. Before Ethan could move, before he could plead, his father, fueled by a senseless fury, hurled the diary into the fireplace. Flames roared to life, greedily consuming the fragile pages. Ethan lunged forward, desperation clawing at his chest. But it was too late. He stood paralyzed, watching the diary, his roadmap, his lifeline, turn to ash in mere seconds. A suffocating silence descended, broken only by the fire's cruel crackle and his father's ragged breathing. A sharp, searing pain radiated through Ethan's chest, as if the flames had devoured not just the diary, but the very hope it had kindled. Tears traced silent paths down his cheeks, each one a testament to the loss of something sacred. Yet even in that shattering moment, Ethan refused to break. Deep within, a small, defiant voice rose above the pain. "The diary may burn, but my dream won't." He wiped his tears, his gaze fixed on the glowing ashes, and made a vow, simple yet unyielding. "I'll write my own story." That oath, born in the crucible of loss, was a battle cry against the forces that sought to chain him. From that night, Ethan was transformed. Though the diary's pages were gone, its lessons had seared themselves into his mind, its wisdom woven into the fabric of his being. He no longer needed ink and paper to chart his course. The gust of hope the diary had ignited was now a part of him, a relentless force propelling him forward despite every hurdle. The slums of Detroit, with their suffocating weight, tried to bind him, but Ethan's spirit refused to be shackled. With a heart scarred yet fiercely alive with dreams, he stood ready to face any storm, any setback, to transform his millionaire vision into reality. The journey had only begun, and Ethan, forged anew in the ashes of loss, was determined to carve a path to greatness, no matter the cost. When Ethan Carter graduated high school, the diploma in his hand, adorned with stellar grades, was more than a mere achievement. It was a golden ticket to escape the oppressive shadows of Detroit's slums. A prestigious university had sent him a full scholarship letter, promising a stable future with a cushy office job and a salary most could only dream of. But Ethan, fueled by the fierce blaze of his millionaire ambitions, did the unthinkable. He folded the letter, tucked it into a drawer, and chose a path of his own. A treacherous road of entrepreneurship, where nothing was certain except the unyielding faith in his heart. With just $200, painstakingly saved in a tin box from grueling nights waiting tables at a run-down diner, Ethan launched his journey. He staked out a bustling street corner, where the pulse of the city never slowed, and built a modest lemonade stand. It was nothing grand, just a few wooden planks cobbled together, a tarp for shade, and cups of hand-squeezed lemonade. But to Ethan, it was the world. Each cup he poured was a fragment of his dream. Each coin dropped by a customer, a step toward greatness. Yet, the neighborhood scoffed at his audacity. Neighbors shook their heads, their laughter biting. "A lemonade stand? Who do you think you are?" Even his mother, Clara, her eyes heavy with worry, clasped his hand and whispered, "You need a steady job, Ethan. Don't take such risks." But Ethan only smiled, his eyes alight with defiance. He'd heard enough doubts. Now was the time to act. Every day, from the first light of dawn to the crimson glow of sunset, Ethan stood behind his stand, sweat soaking his faded t-shirt. Beneath Detroit's scorching summer sun, he crafted each lemonade with care, squeezing lemons, adding ice, and handing cups to customers with a radiant smile. That smile wasn't just a greeting, it was a vow, a silent promise that he'd achieve something extraordinary. At first, only a few curious passers-by stopped, but soon, the tangy sweet allure of his lemonade and Ethan's infectious enthusiasm won them over. Neighborhood kids raced to the stand, workers paused for a refreshing break, and housewives began making detours. What started as a wild notion became the neighborhood's cherished gem, a beacon of hope in a weary community. Every dollar earned, Ethan carefully stashed in his tin box, counting each cent with a joy that words could scarcely capture. For the first time, he tasted success. Small, but potent enough to set his heart ablaze. Each night, as he closed the stand, he watched the bustling crowds and dreamed of a day when his lemonade stand would grow into a chain, an empire. The dream that once felt like distant stars he counted in the slums now seemed tantalizingly close. But fate, ever the cruel trickster, delights in testing those who dare to dream big. One afternoon, as Ethan wiped down his stand, the sky turned ominous. Black clouds rolled in, heavy with the growl of thunder. A savage storm, unrelenting and merciless, crashed over Detroit. Winds howled, rain poured in torrents, and within hours, everything Ethan had built was swept away. His wooden stand splintered into ruins, the tarp shredded, and the tin box holding his hard-earned savings vanished in the flood. When the storm passed, Ethan stood amid the devastation, his shoes sinking into mud, rainwater mingling with tears on his cheeks. He sank to his knees, trembling hands grazing a broken plank, his heart gripped by an unbearable ache. All his effort, all his hope, seemed to have dissolved in a single night. Silence cloaked the wreckage, broken only by the patter of lingering rain on debris. Neighbors who'd once mocked him now watched from afar with pitying eyes. Some muttered, "I told you so. The kid never had a chance." But Ethan didn't hear them. In that crushing moment, when all seemed lost, a small but resolute voice rose within him. "This isn't the end." He lifted his head, gazing at the sky where the first rays of sunlight pierced the dissipating clouds. Tears still fell, but his eyes no longer belonged to a defeated soul. The fire in his heart, though shaken by the storm, still burned, brighter, fiercer than ever. Ethan rose, fists clenched, and wiped away his tears. He knew the path ahead would bristle with challenges, that his dream couldn't be built on a single lemonade stand. This failure, though excruciating, wasn't a full stop. It was a lesson, a scar to remind him that true success demanded perseverance beyond anything he'd yet imagined. With a heart still brimming with ambition, Ethan drew a deep breath and vowed to himself, "I'll rebuild, and this time it'll be bigger." The storm might have destroyed his stand, but it could never extinguish his dream. When a ferocious storm tore through Detroit, ripping apart Ethan Carter's lemonade stand, his first fragile dream, he sank into a darkness so deep that hope seemed like a distant flickering star at the end of an endless tunnel. The wreckage of his stand, scattered across the muddy ground, mirrored the wreckage in his heart. Yet, in the depths of that despair, fate wove a new thread of light, not in the form of wealth or opportunity, but in a person, Sophia. She worked at a quaint coffee shop just steps from where Ethan's stand once stood, a girl whose beauty was matched only by the warmth of her heart, which found glimmers of good even in the bleakest moments. The first time Ethan shuffled into the shop, his threadbare t-shirt clinging to his frame and his shoes caked with mud, Sophia met him with a smile. It wasn't laced with judgment or pity, but glowed with a sincerity that pierced the gloom around him. Day after day, Ethan found himself drawn back to the coffee shop. The cheapest coffee on the menu was a convenient excuse, but it was Sophia's gaze that truly tethered him. Her eyes saw past his worn clothes to the fire burning within him. the unyielding spirit of a young man who refused to let fate crush him. One humid afternoon, as Ethan poured out the story of his shattered lemonade stand, he braced for the familiar scorn or dismissal. But Sophia didn't laugh or urge him to give up. Instead, she reached across the counter, her hand clasping his with a gentle yet resolute grip, and said, "You'll make it, Ethan. I believe in you." Those words, simple yet electric, surged through him, rekindling the embers of hope in his chest. From that moment, Sophia was no longer just a kind stranger. She became his partner, a steadfast companion on a path bristling with thorns. Together, they set out to resurrect the lemonade stand from its ashes. Ethan, his hands rough and calloused from labor, hammered together new planks under the relentless Detroit sun, each nail a defiance of his setbacks. Sophia, with her boundless creativity, brought fresh ideas to their venture. One evening, as they sat catching their breath beside the newly rebuilt stand, she tilted her head and suggested, "Why don't we sell homemade cookies, too? My mom taught me a recipe that's special." Ethan, though hesitant, trusted her vision. Each morning, Sophia rose early, her hands deftly shaping golden, fragrant cookies, each one infused with care. Those cookies, warm and melting on the tongue, quickly outshone the lemonade, drawing crowds who craved their taste of love and dedication. Thanks to Sophia's spark, their modest stand blossomed into a local sensation, a beacon of warmth in Detroit's weary neighborhood. The name Ethan's Lemonade Stand echoed through the streets, and for the first time, Ethan felt his millionaire dream inching closer. No longer a distant fantasy, love bloomed quietly between them, its roots entwined with their shared labor under the dim glow of streetlights. Their hands brushed fleetingly as they scrubbed the stand clean. Their eyes met in stolen glances when customers raved about their cookies, and their dreams of a brighter future wove a silent symphony. They spoke of a cozy house with a garden bursting with flowers, of travels to far-off places, of a life unburdened by want. Each time Sophia's smile lit up her face, Ethan's heart swelled, the slum's weight dissolving like mist in the morning sun. To him, she was more than his love. She was his lodestar, the reason he rose each day to fight. But happiness, delicate as a petal, could not withstand the icy gales of fate forever. One evening, as they lingered by the closed stand, Sophia grew unnaturally quiet. Her eyes, once twin stars that sparkled with life, now shimmered with a sorrow too heavy to name. After a long, trembling pause, she took Ethan's hand, her voice quivering. "I'm sick, Ethan. A rare disease. The doctor says treatment costs a fortune." The words stabbed through Ethan's heart, sharp and cold as a dagger. He sat frozen, the world crumbling around him. Sophia's voice, soft but steady, explained how the illness had been silently consuming her, how without swift treatment, her time was slipping away. The cost of surgery and medicine loomed like a mountain, dwarfing every dream Ethan had ever dared to chase. Time seemed to halt in that moment. The distant rumble of traffic, the whisper of wind through the alley, all faded into a muted hum. Ethan locked eyes with Sophia, where a faint flicker of hope still glowed, and a pain unlike any he'd known surged within him. How could he save the girl he loved when all he had was a fledgling stand and a handful of coins? The stand's success, though a point of pride, was a mere trickle against the torrent needed to keep Sophia alive. He squeezed her hand, yearning to offer solace, but his throat tightened, words trapped in his chest. A single, tormenting question pounded in his mind. What do I do now? That night, after Sophia returned home, Ethan sat alone by the stand, staring into a sky devoid of stars. Silent tears traced his cheeks, but he refused to shatter. Sophia's radiant smile, her heart that warmed even the coldest days, fueled his resolve. He knew the road ahead would be more grueling than any he'd faced, that his millionaire dream now belonged not just to him, but to the girl who'd illuminated his life. With a heart heavy yet pulsing with hope, Ethan made a vow. I'll find a way. Even if it costs everything, I'll save her. In the oppressive darkness of the slums, the fire in his soul blazed fiercer than ever, ready to confront the greatest challenge of his life. The revelation of Sophia's terminal illness struck Ethan Carter like a blade, carving a jagged wound deep in his heart. Each night, as he lay awake, the image of her radiant smile, now eclipsed by eyes clouded with fear, haunted him relentlessly. The modest earnings from their lemonade and cookie stand, though enough to breathe life into his small dream, were mere droplets in the vast, arid desert of saving the girl he loved. But Ethan was no stranger to struggle, and surrender was not in his nature. With a resolve that burned like a furnace, he wagered everything on a daring gamble, a bold, reckless idea that could either transform his life or cast him into the abyss of failure. The spark of inspiration came during a sleepless night as Ethan sat by his window, gazing out at the shadowy Detroit slums. His mind churned, and an idea took root. A local food delivery app, linking small businesses like his humble stand to customers across the city. It was a wild, almost laughable dream for a poor kid with no tech degree, no industry connections, and no resources. The market was dominated by tech titans wielding billion-dollar budgets, and the notion that a lemonade guy from the slums could compete seemed absurd. Neighbors, who'd once sneered at his makeshift stand, now shook their heads in pity. "You're digging your own grave, Ethan." But Sophia's frail gaze, peering from her hospital bed, was the only fuel he needed. For her, he'd risk everything, even the millionaire dream that had sustained him through years of hardship. Ethan poured every cent from the stand, every bead of sweat he and Sophia had shed, into this venture, yet he knew he couldn't do it alone. Summoning courage and raw vulnerability, he turned to old friends, the same ones who'd mocked his ambitions when they were kids racing through the neighborhood's gritty streets. Standing before them, stripped of pride, his eyes ablaze with unyielding determination, he spoke of Sophia, his vision, and a chance to rewrite their futures. His words, simple but charged with conviction, pierced their skepticism. One friend stepped up to write code, another to craft the app's interface, and a few others joined to handle marketing. They had no sleek office or cutting-edge equipment, just a rented room with creaky wooden floors and outdated laptops that hummed in protest. But they shared a singular purpose: to turn Ethan's dream into reality. The days that followed blurred into a grueling marathon. Ethan and his team worked tirelessly, collapsing on the office floor under thin blankets, fueling themselves with stale bread and cold coffee to stay awake. Ethan, his eyes ringed with dark circles, led with a resolve that never wavered, the fire within him undimmed by exhaustion. They wrestled with every technical glitch, fine-tuned every feature, and transformed a fragile idea into a functioning app. Each line of code, each pixel of design, was a step closer to saving Sophia. When the app was ready, they named it Local Byte, a humble name carrying the weight of a community's hopes. On launch day, Ethan stood before the screen, his heart thundering, uncertain if the world would embrace their creation or crush it. Miraculously, Local Byte swept through Detroit like a tidal wave. Customers embraced the ease of ordering from local gems, from tiny lemonade stands to family-run bakeries. But what truly captured their hearts was the story behind the app, the saga of the lemonade guy from the slums daring to dream big for the sake of love. Local newspapers splashed Ethan's story across their pages, residents flooded social media with praise, and within weeks, Local Byte became a sensation. Each order, each download, funneled precious dollars towards Sophia's treatment, a lifeline Ethan clung to with desperate hope. For the first time, he glimpsed light at the end of a long, dark tunnel. But fate, ever merciless, had more trials in store. Just as Local Byte's star began to rise, A call from the hospital stopped Ethan's heart cold. Sophia, her body growing weaker, had been admitted. Dropping everything, revenue reports, team meetings, he raced to her side. In the stark white hospital room, Sophia lay pale, her lips curling into a faint, brave smile. Ethan grasped her hand, the fragility of her fingers entwined with his, cutting deeper than any wound. "You did it, Ethan," she whispered, her voice a fragile thread, woven with pride. But Ethan couldn't muster a smile. Seeing her so frail, a searing pain tore through him, sharper than any fear he'd ever known. The money from Local Bite was flowing, but at this agonizingly slow pace, would it be enough to save her? Every ticking second was a desperate race against time, and Ethan knew failure was not an option. That night, by her bedside, Ethan sat in heavy silence, his hand still cradling Sophia's. The neon glow from the hallway cast a soft light across her face, illuminating her delicate features. He vowed to himself, a silent, unshakable oath. I won't lose her. Local Bite was succeeding, but the funds fell short of the staggering cost to keep Sophia alive. This gamble, his improbable tech dream, was his final shot, a do-or-die bid to defy fate. With a heart weighed by dread yet buoyed by hope, he watched her sleep, her chest rising and falling in delicate rhythm. A silent promise echoed within him. I'll do everything, even if it costs me everything. The fire in his soul, though battered by fear and relentless pressure, roared fiercer than ever, a defiant blaze ready to confront any challenge to keep Sophia, the light of his life, from fading into the dark. The triumph of Local Bite, Ethan Carter's local food delivery app, was more than a miracle for the gritty slums of Detroit. It was a blazing inferno that lit up the vast sky of the tech world. Born from the audacious vision of a young man armed with nothing but raw determination, Local Bite transformed into a cultural phenomenon, weaving its way into every household, every bustling street corner, with thousands of downloads flooding in daily. The story of the Lemonade Guy, a slum kid daring to challenge the towering tech giants, spread like wildfire, igniting local newspapers and sparking fervent discussions across online forums. Yet, for all its radiant glory, this victory could not pierce the heavy shadow cast over Ethan's life. Sophia, the girl who held his heart, lay fading on a hospital bed, her frail body a stark reminder that no amount of success could shield him from fear. One crisp morning, as Ethan sifted through revenue figures in their cramped makeshift office, an unexpected email landed in his inbox. It was from a legendary Silicon Valley venture capital firm, renowned for sculpting startups into billion-dollar empires. The words on the screen sent his pulse racing, each syllable a jolt to his soul. They offered to buy Local Bite for $50 million, a sum that gleamed like a lone star in a midnight sky. That money could cover Sophia's life-saving treatment, wrench her from the clutches of death, and catapult Ethan from a slum dweller to a millionaire. In that fleeting moment, the world seemed to hold its breath. The dream he'd once traced among the stars, lying on a creaky bed in the slums, was now just a nod away, tantalizingly close. But this shimmering opportunity bore a bitter cost. The firm's condition was ruthless. Ethan must uproot his life, move to California, work under their strict command, and surrender control of Local Bite, the creation he and his team had forged through countless nights of sweat and tears. Accepting meant abandoning his vision of building an empire on his own terms, handing over the reins of Local Bite's future, and sacrificing a piece of his very soul. Ethan stood at the most wrenching crossroads of his life. On one side burned his love for Sophia, her fragile, trusting gaze, the desperate chance to keep her by his side. On the other roared his relentless ambition, the fire that had propelled him from the slum's shadows to this dizzying peak, the dream of freedom and power he'd poured everything into chasing. That night, Ethan sat vigil by Sophia's hospital bed in a sterile white room. The flickering neon light from the hallway spilled across her face, pale yet ethereal, like moonlight on a still lake. Sophia slept, her breaths shallow and delicate, each one a fragile thread that could snap at any moment. Ethan held her hand, the faint warmth of her fingers entwined with his, anchoring him amidst a storm of emotions. Memories flooded his mind. The days they'd built the lemonade stand, hammering planks under the scorching sun. The late nights baking cookies, their laughter mingling with the scent of sugar. Their shared dreams of a future painted in vibrant hues. How could he let her slip away? Yet, if he relinquished Local Bite, would he still be Ethan? The boy who'd sworn, amidst the slum's chaos, to carve his own destiny. In that suspended moment, time seemed to crawl. Ethan closed his eyes, letting his heart chart the path ahead. Sophia's smile, radiant even in his memory, and her voice whispering, "I believe in you," echoed through his soul. He knew no dream, no empire, could hold a candle to keeping her alive. But Ethan was not one to yield completely. A spark flared in his mind, a daring, defiant plan to save Sophia while clutching a fragment of his dream. With steady hands, he opened his laptop, drafting a secret clause to weave into the contract, a cunning move even the sharp-eyed venture firm wouldn't detect. As the first light of dawn crept through the hospital window, Ethan signed the deal to sell Local Bite, his pen steady, but his heart a churning tempest, torn between love and ambition. The next morning, Sophia stirred awake, her weary eyes brightening at the sight of Ethan by her side. He offered a gentle smile, a fragile mask concealing the weight of his sacrifices. "Everything will be okay," he whispered, his voice resolute yet veiling the cost of what he'd surrendered. Sophia squeezed his hand, asking no questions, only returning a smile that seemed to sense the gravity of his choice. Ethan kept silent about the deal, the $50 million, and the secret clause he'd buried within the contract. He simply stayed there, beside the girl who'd become his everything, certain he'd chosen the path where love led, yet preserved a flicker of his dream. In that quiet moment, Ethan transcended his origins as a boy from the slums. He was a man ready to lay everything on the line for what mattered most. Selling Local Bite, though it tore at his core, was a vital step to save Sophia. But the secret clause, a hidden ace he held close, proved he hadn't forsaken his vision entirely. The fire in his heart, tested by brutal choices and heart-wrenching trade-offs, burned fiercer than ever, unyielding and alive. Gazing at Sophia, his heart swelled with hope, and he made a silent vow. This isn't the end, but a new beginning. The road ahead, though uncertain, pulsed with possibility, and Ethan stood ready to face it, his love for Sophia and his dreams intertwined, each fueling the other in a dance of resilience and courage. After signing the $50 million deal to sell Local Bite, Ethan Carter felt a crushing burden lift from his shoulders, as if the weight of 1,000 sleepless nights had dissolved. Yet, his heart remained heavy, tethered to the sacrifices he'd made, letting go of the company he'd built from nothing but grit and dreams. That money wasn't merely numbers on a contract. It was a lifeline, a radiant beacon of hope to save Sophia, the girl who'd become his world. Without hesitation, Ethan funneled the funds into her surgery and treatment, ensuring every dollar worked to pull her back from the brink. The long, agonizing days in the hospital, where he sat by her bedside, clutching her frail hand and scanning her face for any flicker of recovery, tested his soul. But those moments, steeped in quiet hope and fear, proved every choice, every shard of pain, was worth it. Slowly, miraculously, Sophia's strength returned. Her cheeks, once ghostly pale, bloomed with a rosy glow. Her eyes, dulled by illness, sparkled with life again. And her smile, the smile that had once guided Ethan through the darkest corners of his existence, shone with a brilliance that rivaled the sun. Each time Sophia smiled, Ethan felt the world ignite, as if the oppressive shadows of Detroit's slums had melted into a distant memory. But Ethan was not a man to linger in the warmth of triumph. Though he'd lost Local Bite, the creation he and his ragtag team had poured sweat, tears, and sleepless nights into, the fire of his ambitions still roared within him. He refused to let the sales fortune be a fleeting spark, a mere footnote in his story. Armed with the hard-won lessons of his entrepreneurial journey, the growing legend of the lemonade guy who dared to dream beyond the slums, and a heart that pulsed with unrelenting yearning, Ethan set out on a new path. He founded a chain of healthy food stores, christened Sophia, in honor of the woman who'd reshaped his life. The name wasn't just a tribute, it was a symbol of hope, resilience, and the promise of renewal, a testament to their shared journey from despair to victory. Each store stood as a chapter in their saga, a vivid reminder of the arduous climb from the grim alleys of the slums to the dazzling heights of success. The Sophia chain was more than a business. It was a living narrative of perseverance and love. Every location was designed with meticulous care, its walls adorned with evocative images of the Detroit slums where Ethan had grown up, capturing the grit and struggle of his origins. Inscriptions etched into the decor chronicled the milestones of Ethan and Sophia's journey, from the humble lemonade stand to the empire they now nurtured. Customers didn't flock to the stores merely for crisp salads or fresh juices. They came to touch a piece of the American dream, the unshakable belief that anyone, no matter how humble their beginnings, could rise to greatness. The chain's growth was meteoric, spreading from Detroit's heart to major cities across the United States, each new store a beacon of possibility. Articles in glossy magazines, segments on national TV, and fervent posts on social media amplified Ethan's story, celebrating not just his business acumen, but his unwavering commitment to his community. Audiences across the nation were enthralled by the tale of a man who, despite achieving wealth and fame, never turned his back on his roots, choosing instead to give back with a generosity that matched his success. Ethan channeled his prosperity into repaying those who'd lifted him and uplifting those still trapped in the shadows. He established a scholarship fund for impoverished children, offering a lifeline of education to kids who, like the young Ethan, had nothing but dreams and worn-out shoes. He built community centers in the heart of the slums, safe havens where struggling families could find resources, support, and a glimmer of hope. But his most profound act of gratitude was reserved for the woman who'd sacrificed everything to raise him. His mother, Clara. Ethan moved her from the cramped, creaking apartment, where her soft lullabies had once muffled his father's drunken rages, to a dream home bathed in light, its garden overflowing with vibrant flowers. For the first time in his life, Ethan saw his mother weep tears of pure joy, her face alight with a happiness he'd never witnessed. That moment, raw and radiant, was worth more to him than any fortune, a treasure no amount of money could rival. As the Sophia chain flourished and Ethan's name became synonymous with inspiration, he guarded one secret close to his heart, the hidden clause in the Local Bite sale contract. Not even Sophia knew of the ace he'd deftly slipped into the deal with the Silicon Valley venture firm. Ethan never spoke of it, never flaunted his foresight, but waited in silence, like a master strategist, certain the game was far from over. That secret, a smoldering ember in his soul, was proof that he was more than a devoted lover. He was a brilliant tactician, always keeping a fragment of his dream within grasp, ready to reignite at the right moment. Each day, as Ethan walked into a Sophia store, greeted by bustling lines of customers and the warm smiles of his staff, he felt the profound weight of his journey, from a boy scavenging in trash heaps to a man shaping lives. But the truest joy, the pulse of his existence, came when he returned home to Sophia. Now healthy, her eyes brimmed with love, reflecting a future they'd fought so hard to claim. Together, they embraced each new day, no longer as desperate dreamers battling the slum's cruelty, but as partners forging a luminous path forward. Every smile from Sophia, every gentle hand clasped in his, was a vivid reminder that his sacrifices, every wrenching choice, every piece of himself he'd given up, had been worth it. Yet deep within, Ethan knew his story wasn't complete. The secret clause, like a seed buried in fertile soil, lay dormant, awaiting its moment to burst forth and unveil a surprise that would redefine his legacy. On the day the Sophia healthy food chain unveiled its 100th location, Detroit thrummed with a vibrant electric energy that seemed to pulse through the city's veins. A magnificent stage rose in the heart of downtown, its brilliant lights casting a radiant glow over a neighborhood once cloaked in the oppressive darkness of the slums. A diverse crowd converged, devoted customers, proud employees, eager reporters, and curious locals, all drawn together by the promise of a historic milestone. Ethan Carter, no longer the boy with tattered shoes and desperate dreams, stepped onto the stage, his simple suit exuding a quiet confidence. The crowd erupted in a wave of applause, their cheers echoing through the night, unaware that the moment to come would strike like a thunderbolt, sealing Ethan's story as a legend. Ethan stood at the podium, his eyes shimmering with a blend of nostalgia and resolve. His voice, warm and unwavering, wove a spell over the audience, drawing them back to the earliest chapters of his life. He spoke of the Detroit slums, where his mother's lullabies, soft yet steadfast, drowned out his father's drunken rages. He recounted the discovery of a tattered diary in a trash heap, its faded words sparking the audacious dream of becoming a millionaire. He shared the story of his humble lemonade stand. Each cup poured a silent vow to rise above his circumstances. And then, with a tenderness that hushed the crowd, he spoke of Sophia, the beacon who illuminated his darkest days, the girl who taught him that love could triumph over even the cruelest twists of fate. The audience hung on his every word, their hearts stirred as if Ethan's story was etching itself into their souls. Then, Ethan paused, his gaze seeking Sophia in the front row. Her eyes, sparkling with pride and unspoken love, met his, and a smile, both gentle and cryptic, curved his lips. "I sold Local Bite to save Sophia," he began, his voice steady but charged with emotion. "But I didn't tell you everything. In that contract, I kept a share, and today, that share is worth $200 million. The auditorium froze, the air thick with astonishment. The applause that had roared moments before fell silent, replaced by a collective gasp. The secret clause Ethan had slyly embedded in the deal was a 10% stake in Local Bite. Under the Silicon Valley firm's stewardship, the company had skyrocketed into a tech juggernaut, transforming Ethan's modest share into a staggering fortune. The revelation hit like lightning splitting a clear sky, and the crowd exploded into a frenzy of cheers and thunderous applause. They weren't merely dazzled by Ethan's cunning. They were profoundly moved by the arc of his journey. He had saved Sophia, ensuring she remained by his side with her health restored, while simultaneously building a new empire with the Sophia chain and securing a monumental stake in Local Bite. He had accomplished what no one from the slums had dared to dream, safeguarding his love while conquering his vision of wealth. Yet what truly gripped the audience wasn't the $200 million. It was Ethan's heart, a heart that refused to yield, even when faced with the most excruciating choices life could impose. As Ethan stepped down from the stage, he reached for Sophia's hand, their fingers intertwining in a quiet, powerful moment. The stage lights enveloped them, casting a glow that felt like the world itself was bearing witness to a love story perfected through trials. They stood together, the relentless applause washing over them, and Ethan's voice rose once more, delivering a message that resonated like a clarion call. "Dreams have no finish line, as long as you dare to keep going." Those words, simple yet imbued with unshakable strength, weren't merely the conclusion of Ethan's odyssey. They were a spark, igniting inspiration in millions. From the desolate slums to the pinnacle of success, From a boy with nothing but hope to a millionaire with a boundless heart, Ethan had proven that nothing was unattainable with love, perseverance, and a dash of fearless audacity. The impact of that moment stretched far beyond the auditorium's walls. Ethan and Sophia's story rippled across America, carried by newspaper headlines, viral videos, and fervent social media posts. It touched hearts in cities and small towns alike, becoming a beacon of the American dream. Not the hollow pursuit of wealth, but the courage to live true to one's deepest convictions. The image of Ethan and Sophia, hand in hand under the radiant lights, became a symbol of resilience, a reminder that every struggle, every sacrifice, could lead to a triumphant ending for those who refused to halt their stride. Ethan's journey, from scavenging in trash heaps to commanding a stage before thousands, was a testament to the power of an unyielding spirit. The diary that once fueled his dreams, though reduced to ashes, had left its mark, its lessons woven into his very being. The lemonade stand, a humble beginning, had been the first step toward an empire. And Sophia, the heart of his story, had been the light that guided him through every storm. Together, they had faced the impossible, poverty, illness, and doubt, and emerged not just victorious, but transformed, their love a force stronger than fate itself. As the crowd's cheers echoed into the night, Ethan and Sophia stood as living proof that dreams, no matter how distant, could be seized with grit and heart. Their story wasn't just about wealth or success. It was about the courage to hold fast to what matters most, to fight for love and ambition in equal measure. The slums that once sought to bind Ethan were now a distant memory, replaced by a legacy that would inspire generations. And as they stepped into the future, hand in hand, Ethan knew that every hardship had been worth it. For Sophia, for his mother, for the boy who once counted stars and dared to believe in a brighter tomorrow.